Every year, countries get together in a conference, the COP, the Conference of Parties.
Inside, government delegates from all around the world trying to negotiate this legal text. Outside, you have anybody and everybody who's interested in climate change.
Na nossa região está acontecendo muitas coisas que não tinham acontecido antes. Passa muito tempo agora sem chover, sem água.
We are the 5% of the world population and we protect 80% of the forest.
This is what a 1.2 degree average global temperature increase looks like. Carry on as we are, and a 3 degree catastrophe awaits our species and all others.
You, the parties, now stand before the eyes of the world, entrusted with the decisions needed to promote the effective implementation of the Convention.
Leaders from around the world gathered to form what would become the Kyoto Protocol. The agreement called on industrialised nations to cut emissions by an average of about 5% by 2012.
Decided. Le pari pour le climat est accepté.
2015, history in Paris.
Their promises when it comes to helping the poorest and most vulnerable was one area where little progress was made.
Developed countries have turned up here and have refused to commit to a legitimate process.
Our future is being robbed from us. You might as well bomb our islands instead of making us suffer only to witness our slow and fateful demise.
We finally reached an agreement in Paris, and we have failed to respond.
Now to the COP28 climate conference and efforts to address global warming.
Leaders have gathered at the COP28 climate summit in Dubai.
عندما التزمنا باستضافة كوب 28 التزمنا أيضاً بجمع العالم لكي نتحد.
Our grandchildren won't be asking what we said. They will be living with the consequences of what we did or didn't do.
Make this COP a game changer.
كان من المهم بالنسبة لنا أن نبني الثقة والزخم في وقت مبكر من العملية، ولذلك كان من المشجع رؤية الطموح العالي الكبير من قبل جميع الأطراف في بداية اليوم الأول للمؤتمر.
I declare His Excellency Dr. Sultan Ahmed Al-Jaber elected President of the 28th session of the Conference of the Parties.
Every nation, every sector, and every one of us has an urgent and an immediate role to play. We must ensure that this COP delivers consensus. We have no time to waste. Let this be the COP where we deliver on our promises from the 100 billion to loss and damage.
This is something that poor developing nations have been pushing for a long time. And at its core, this is basically a fund set up by wealthy nations to give money to poor nations to cover the impacts of climate change.
There's been a lot of talking for the last 28 years, and it's time for action. And what we want is funding.
Loss and damage really speaks to the heart of climate change. If we can't solve for that, how can we solve for some of the bigger issues? And I think that that's why it was so important to deliver that and to deliver it so powerfully at COP.
I invite the COP to turn to document entitled The Operationalization of the New Funding Arrangements, including a fund responding to loss and damage. Hearing no objections, it is so decided.
The United Arab Emirates will contribute $100 million to the pot, along with other countries.
COP28 Climate Summit is kicking off in Dubai today. Officials have agreed on a loss and damage fund for natural disasters.
Like the government of the United Arab Emirates, the German government stands ready to kickstart the new fund with $100 million.
The UK is delighted to announce up to £60 million for loss and damage.
Japan pledges $10 million.
To see, Your Excellency, that the loss and damage fund will be established to the tune of more than $200 million in the first 20 minutes of acceptance. I think this is a good statement of intent.
Thank you very much, Zambia, for your kind words. And like we promised, this is going to be a different COP with a different presidency, very much centered around action and implementation.
Day one has brought a surprise breakthrough with leaders agreeing to launch a fund. That is something poorer nations have been fighting for 3 decades.
We really applaud the excellent decision that was made on the very first day of the COP.
I want to commend the COP presidency because the issue around investment and the biggest challenge is, if you will, it's running towards gunfire. That's leadership.
This represents a new day for climate finance, a new day to help build trust, and it's a new day to build the true new climate economy.
Well, I think there's a lot of hope, huge amount of hope. Great expectations, literally, because people know how urgent this is right now. There's just a sense of crisis on a global basis. We can't solve the problem of the planet if we don't have everybody at the table.
This year, I'm sure you noticed, COP is more inclusive. This industry can do a lot, and we believed in that from day one.
The Oil and Gas Decarbonization Charter has some very core elements to it. By 2025, we're asking for the entire industry to identify what their 2030 interim targets are going to be, and then to update the world in 2028. With respect to methane, the 2030 target is imperative, and we're pushing for near zero upstream methane by 2030.
In terms of the temperatures that we will otherwise see in the next decade, today could be the single most impactful day of announcements from any COP in my 30 years at the Environmental Defense Fund.
Everyone is here to try and shape the future for their own children, their children's children. This is not just an event. This is a movement.
At COP28, we are anchoring nature as an existential ally to address climate change and advance development, especially for and with Indigenous peoples and local communities. This is the first time that COP had this amount of youth involved and included. We must recognize the common language we must speak of, and it's one of unity, of inclusion, love, and empowerment.
Getting center stage for food and ag, having a day dedicated for food and ag at a COP is historic in itself.
I think something special is really happening here. I will stay focused on delivery and maintaining this momentum until we land the most ambitious response to the global stocktake.
We are designing what the political week is going to look like. We have our ministers arriving tomorrow, so we have to choreograph how the ministers are going to be engaged in the process. So all of that needs to be put together now.
The biggest question in the lead up to COP28 is how are we going to deliver on the ambition of the Paris Agreement?
Paris had a clear mandate. They had to deliver a treaty, a pathway to, having ambitious goals when it comes to combating climate change. And one of the outcomes of the Paris Agreement was the global stocktake.
The importance of the global stocktake is that it will be an outcome that assesses what parties have been doing so far since the Paris Agreement, what are the gaps, and how do we get to our 1.5 goal.
The global stocktake is the engine of the Paris Agreement. Its purpose is to ensure that we meet our targets. Sadly, our starting point is clear. We are not on track.
This is as thorny and difficult a public policy exercise as there is, because every country has different interests, different culture, different economies, and different capacities to be able to respond.
You know, all decision text has to be agreed by consensus. We have to have a collective process.
When you say it's a party-driven process, you know, in the Security Council, you have 5 countries with vetoes. Yeah. In this process, you have every country with a veto.
Any party at any moment can say, actually, this wasn't good enough, or actually, this went too far, and can break consensus. That is the beauty and the greatest challenge.
We do think that the references to means of implementation is weak.
We saw there is a lot of new expression and unclear concept regarding the means of implementation.
We suggest restoration and conservation of ecosystems.
1.5 scenario reference in the adaptation context might be misleading.
All countries need to agree on something that is so important. It's actually almost an impossible job, right?
Dr. Al-Jaber, could you just answer one question from the press? Dr. Al-Jaber, one question from the press.
Look, I realized very early on that this was not going to be an easy task. There were moments where I honestly lost my sleep, thinking, okay, this is not necessarily going in the right direction. So I had a conversation with my team, and we came up with the idea of conducting the Majlis.
Allow me to start by first saying Assalamu alaikum. That is exactly how we start our Majlis setting. I hope that this setting is going to give us the opportunity to focus on us coming out of this discussion with a set of understandings that will allow us to create the necessary solutions to bridge our gaps. I do care about the time we spend in this discussion. We need to chin up and look at each other and to have a proper and direct conversation.
Mr. President, you talk about speaking from the heart. So I'm going to do that. By 2040, if nothing is done, then the Marshall Islands will be forced to relocate people. They will have abandoned their home, and of course the bones of their ancestors will be swept under the waves.
What I would encourage everyone to do is not look at it in terms of what your head says. Explore your heart. Put yourself in the position of Bangladesh, in the position of Tuvalu, in the position of the Marshall Islands. It is only when we have empathy, it is only when we are able to put ourselves in the shoes of someone else, it is only when we feel what they feel, that is when we will get progress.
Now, the question is, of course, who has the power and where is the power that allow us or not to take decisions, certain decisions. When our president said last year that he was not going to sign new exploration contracts, the peso devaluated next week. Then the credit rating agencies came to our finance minister and said, we're going to downgrade you because you are putting on the line the resources that pay for your debt.
This is the peace project of our time. The power comes from the heavens. It drives the weather systems. It belongs to everyone. It exists in every country, in every continent, in different form. I absolutely agree with my Colombian colleague, Susanna, what you say. It needs a complete change to the global financial architecture. That's no small task we have. Unite, act, and deliver. That's what we need to do in the next 2 days. Thank you.
It's the first time ministers were so open and so unrestrained about what they were talking about.
Tensions are running high on the final scheduled day of the COP28 climate summit in Dubai.
Time is running out for countries at the COP28 summit to come to a consensus on tackling climate change.
Currently, we're waiting for an updated draft of the decision text.
It's the night of the 12th, and everybody's like, where's the text? We want to see the text. Hannah's in one room, Iman's in another room, His Excellency Adnan's in another room, His Excellency Dr. Sultan's in another room. We are really holding back and consulting and trying to get feedback on what we're trying to put on the table.
The United Nations COP28 summit went into overtime in Dubai.
They basically have been working on a draft overnight Dubai time. They're going to release that new draft and then have a new session to get everyone back together and try to find consensus.
When you're sitting on the podium and you're proposing the adoption of an intergovernmental treaty-based decision where the stakes are very high, anything can happen.
I invite the CMA to consider agenda item 4, first global stocktake.
I'm sitting on the stage, listening to Dr. Sultan read out the global stocktake, and I'm just extremely nervous. Like, I'm looking at every single country, I'm looking at every single flag, I'm looking at every single mic, seeing if someone's going to request the floor.
I invite the CMA to adopt the draft decision entitled Outcome of the First Global Stocktake. Hearing no objection, it is so decided.
And he gavelled.
It is so decided, like, oh my God, we did it.
All of the parties were able to overcome the difficulties and challenges and work together to deliver an outcome that I think is really good for this process and really proves that multilateralism works in a powerful way.
Breaking news overnight, a historic breakthrough at COP28.
A new global deal on climate change has been approved by almost 200 countries.
History has been made at COP28 in Dubai. The deal is done.
A deal has been reached. I promised a different sort of COP. A COP that brought everyone together. And we delivered world first after world first. We operationalized loss and damage and started to fill the fund. We mobilized more than $83 billion in new financial commitments. A global goal to triple renewable energy and double energy efficiency. Declarations on agriculture. Declarations on food. Declarations on health. It is an enhanced, balanced, but make no mistake, historic package to accelerate climate action. It is the UAE consensus. To His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, the President of the United Arab Emirates, I hope we made you proud, sir.
Dr. Sultan, are you proud of what you've achieved, Justin? Can I shake you by the hand?
Sir, thank you. I very much appreciate your offer. No, thank you, and well done. Thank you. This has been a very rich experience for everyone.
نجح اتفاق الإمارات التاريخي في توحيد الجهود وتغليب المصلحة العالمية المشتركة على المصالح الفردية للدول وتعزيز جهود المجتمع الدولي لتحقيق النمو والازدهار للبشرية بأكملها.